Kaveh Saidi back again with another violin shoulder rest shootout. This one might be the ultimate because I am reviewing 4 Kun violin shoulder rests that I've acquired over the years. Right here we got the Kun Collapsible shoulder rest. Second up, the Kun Super. And third up, the original regular Kun shoulder rest. And lastly, the Bravo shoulder rest. And as you can see, they all have the same basic shape. So what's the difference between these 4 shoulder rests, you might ask? Why don't we go ahead and start off by highlighting the main differences as why you would choose one of these over the other. So first up we have the Kun Collapsible shoulder rest, and the main feature of this shoulder rest is that it collapses. The feet collapse, so you can put it in your violin case a little bit easier than the other ones. If you have kind of like a dart-shaped case, then this could go underneath the neck inside of the case, something like that. Whereas the other ones might not fit so well in a dart-shaped case. By that I mean slightly triangular case. If you have a full-size oblong violin case, then all 4 will fit just fine. But I will say that I noticed one thing about this shoulder rest that makes it unique, and maybe you noticed the same, is that it's a little bit wider this way. A little bit wider, especially than the Super Kun, which is probably the skinniest out of the bunch. But I can tell you that this one, the Collapsible Kun, is probably the most comfortable. Why do I say the collapsible model is the most comfortable? Well, it seems to have the most give, kind of a spring-like motion right here when you put it on your shoulder. If you're gripping down a little bit or you're jumping around, it seems to absorb shock a little bit better. One side note that I've noticed is that this might also be a reason that your shoulder rest might be falling off, because as it gives this way, the feet expand outward a little bit. Have you ever noticed that your shoulder rest falls off a little bit more easier than others? Well, that might be because it bends this way, which might push the feet out outwards a little bit and change the position of the shoulder rest, leading it to fall off more often. This is something that I thought about recently, and it seemed to make sense. I wish I had a more scientific way of proving that, but I can say, leading into the next shoulder rest, that the Bravo model, the most expensive model, does not do that. If I push down with the same bit of force as I did with the Collapsible, the Bravo model does not give in the same way. And that's because this is a solid piece of wood right here. Solid brass fittings, not entirely plastic. There seem to be some plastic elements inside the feet. All of these models will tilt this way on your violin. I want to say with some certainty that they do. Maybe the Deluxe, the Super, doesn't tilt as much as the other ones. But what I can say about the Bravo is that, yes, it definitely feels more solid, more firm, more supportive in that sense. If you don't like that feeling of springiness from plastic. This is also the fanciest model, so if you show up to a wedding gig with this, your friends that you're playing with might think your violin is more expensive than it is. One aspect of this shoulder rest that I've noticed is that on certain violins, not this one, it does seem to focus the tone more than the other ones and absorb less of the tone. Focusing the tone and absorbing less is always a good thing, especially when compared to something like a sponge, which will definitely deaden the sound of your violin a little bit. So, not with this violin. My old violin, I did notice that the tone was improved with this shoulder rest as opposed to other shoulder rests. Moving on, the Kun Super. Definitely as comfortable as the other ones. The thing about the Super that's good when compared to the collapsible model and the standard model is that the plastic on the Super is definitely more firm. It seems to be put together a little bit to a more high standard than the other two plastic models. Now that I think about it, it seems to rotate on this axis pretty well. So disregard what I said about that. What's great about this one is that there is one adjustment right here which slides this part of the shoulder rest out like a ruler. So you can really fine-tune the length. You can really fit it really well with the Kun Super if you're very finicky, because the other shoulder rests have kind of these stops which are maybe about 4 millimeters apart, and you can't go 2 millimeters apart. Whereas with this Kun Super, I don't know if you can see it, see that little dial there? You loosen it, you pull it out, slide it back in like a ruler. Unfortunately, there's no adjustment on this end, so you're kind of stuck with the position of the shoulder rest on this end. Now, are you going to notice it when compared to the other shoulder rests? Not much, but if you have a center mounted chin rest, you might want this curve to come more that way on in relation to your body. So center mounted chin rest, the violin is more towards your left. Maybe you want the whole shoulder rest to shift towards your right, which is why you might want the other ones and not the Kun Super. Excuse me, I have something in my teeth. Lastly, I'm wearing the original model, the Kun original shoulder rest, which does not collapse in the case, which does rotate on this axis. I don't know if you can see, just like the pretty much all the other ones. Actually rotates a little bit more, I want to say, now that I think about it, than the Bravo. If you like kind of like a steep angle or a flatter angle on your shoulder. This one does give in a way that is similar to the collapsible, not as much. I'd say this is probably the second most springy. The first most springy being the collapsible. The third, in terms of stiffness, we're going stiffer, the Super. And definitely the stiffest being the Bravo. This original model is probably the one most students should get as their first good shoulder rest. Probably the one you should get as well. I'll have a link down below to all these different shoulder rests. In terms of the price, this one and the collapsible are probably the most affordable. None of these are incredibly expensive, although the Bravo is about $85 now, which you might think is expensive, but when your violin costs a couple $1,000s or more, then this is really not a big expense and worth it if you value the focusing of the tone. But going back to the original, this is the one that I grew up on when I was a kid. I didn't really know about the other ones, and now you do know about the other ones. What would I say in summary? Well, I would say that the best one to get is the Bravo. The focusing of the tone, the solidity of the feet, it slips less because of that stiffness when placed on your shoulder. If you're bobbing up and down or squeezing, the feet are not going to jut outward and it will not slip as much as the other ones. Not guaranteed not to slip or guaranteed to slip. In other words, pretty much all shoulder rests will slip off, but these are all pretty stable. I don't know if you could tell that the redesigned feet are not present on this Super. This is an old one that I found. Definitely the best one. Looks the nicest. It's the blingiest. You know, you want to wear a watch. you want to wear a nice shoulder rest, this is the blingy one. Probably in order, the second best is probably this Super. It is stiffer and more stable. I'm assuming that the new one has redesigned feet. I have to check that on the website. And it is finicky in terms of adjustment. If you're finicky about that adjustment, it's also a simplified design in terms of the adjustment. And between the original and the collapsible, this is the collapsible, yeah. I would say the collapsible is a little bit more comfortable because it seems to be slightly wider. I don't know if you can see, it's probably my imagination, but it seems wider throughout. I'll measure it at some point and I'll do another video about it, but I already set up all the cameras. I'm not gonna take a break at this point. I gotta finish this. So if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much. Why don't you go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be putting out a lot more videos about violin gear, some lessons, some play-alongs. I got original music down below that you might want to explore. And don't forget, if you're a beginner, I made a violin lesson series that takes you from beginner to intermediate with the Essential Elements books 1 and 2. I made a lesson for every page of the book. It's about 50 lessons that are for free here on YouTube. With that said, I hope you have a good day and you practice. You know, don't forget to shut off all your electronics and practice for a good amount and go outside, get some exercise. All right, peace, people. Kaveh Saidi saying thank you so much.